Okay, so you want to own a golf course. Roughly 150 acres of beautiful land, members paying dues, green fees rolling in every weekend. And you get to walk the fairways in the morning like you own the place. Because you do. Here's the problem. The golf is not the business. The golf is the expense. That grass will cost you a fortune to keep alive. It will drink an astonishing amount of water, and the money you make from people actually hitting balls across it is often the smallest, thinnest, least reliable income on the property. Which raises an obvious question. If the golf loses money, why does anyone own a golf course? The answer has almost nothing to do with golf. Let's start with what you've actually bought, because most people picture a park and what they've really purchased is a farm. And here's the first surprise, before we even get to the grass. Golf courses can be shockingly cheap to buy. Not the famous ones, obviously. A trophy club with a waiting list and a championship pedigree trades for enormous sums. But out in the ordinary market, distressed. And mid-tier courses have changed hands for sums that sound impossible for 150 acres of developed land. Sometimes a few million. Sometimes far less. There have been courses sold for less than the price of a single suburban house on the street next to them, which should immediately make you suspicious. Because in real estate, a cheap price is never a gift. It's a warning. It means the market has looked at this asset, done the arithmetic, and concluded that the thing you are about to buy will consume more money than it produces. You are not being handed a bargain. You are being handed a bill that hasn't arrived yet. So the real question is never the purchase price. It's the burn. A golf course is somewhere around 150 acres of turf, and not ordinary turf. Every part of it has a different job and a different set of demands. The greens are the most extreme. They are mown to a height measured in fractions of an inch, which is far shorter than any grass is naturally designed to survive. And keeping a plant alive while cutting it that aggressively, day after day, is a genuinely difficult agricultural feat. The fairways need to be immaculate but slightly longer. The rough needs to be consistent. The bunkers need their sand raked, edged, and periodically replaced. And all of it has to look, every single morning, like nature did it by accident. To achieve that, you employ a superintendent, who is not a groundskeeper but an agronomist, and a crew who start work before sunrise, so the course is ready before the first players walk out. You run a fleet of specialized machinery, mowers, aerators, sprayers, utility vehicles. That costs a startling amount to buy and to maintain. You have an irrigation system buried under the entire property, with thousands of sprinkler heads, pumps, and controllers, which is essentially a small municipal water utility that you personally own and are personally responsible for repairing. And you spend the year fighting a slow war against biology, fungus, insects, weeds, compacted soil that has to be aerated so roots can breathe, which temporarily makes the course worse in order to keep it alive, which your members will complain about every single time. Drought stress, winter kill. The grass is trying to die constantly, and your entire operations budget exists to talk it out of that, every day, forever. Which brings us to the single largest and most dangerous input in this business: water. A golf course is one of the thirstiest things a person can own. On a hot summer day, a single 18-hole course can consume hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. Not per season, per day. And that water has to come from somewhere, and wherever it comes from, it is getting more expensive, more regulated, and more politically contested every year. In some regions, you might own a well, or hold historic water rights, which is a genuine asset. In others, you are buying it from a municipality at commercial rates and watching the bill climb. And in the driest places, you may be forced onto recycled water, or handed a hard allocation, or told during a drought that you are simply not permitted to irrigate the way you need to, and there is nothing you can do about it. Sit with that for a second. You own an asset whose entire value depends on the condition of the grass, and your ability to keep that grass alive depends on a resource that a government can restrict, a drought can remove, and a public increasingly resents you for using at all. That's not a line item. That's an existential dependency, and it's the reason so many courses in dry regions are quietly one bad decade away from not existing. And the politics of it only run one direction. When a city is rationing water, and residents are being told to let their own lawns go brown, and take shorter showers, A green, glistening, perfectly irrigated golf course sitting in the middle of town is the single most conspicuous target imaginable. It doesn't matter how efficient your irrigation system is, or how much recycled water you use, or how carefully you've reduced your turf acreage. You are, visually, the enemy. And that political pressure has a way of turning into policy, into hard allocations, and surcharges, and outright bans which land on your business specifically. Very few industries have to plan around the possibility that being visibly good at your job will make you a public villain. All right, now let's talk about the strangest structural problem in this business. And it's one almost no other industry has to deal with in quite this form. Your revenue is physically capped and your costs are not. Here's what I mean. To make money from golf, people have to play golf on your course. But golf is extraordinarily slow, and it takes up an enormous amount of space per customer. A group of 4 players takes something like 4 hours to get around 18 holes. And while they're out there, they are occupying the entire property in sequence. You can send groups out at intervals, but only so fast, because if you crowd them, play backs up, everyone waits. On every shot, the experience becomes miserable, and your customers stop coming back. So the pace of play sets a hard ceiling on how many groups you can push through in a day. And on top of that, you can only do it in daylight, and only in decent weather, and only in the months when your climate cooperates. So, do the arithmetic in your head. Even a busy, well-run course is serving a limited number of golfers per day, and each of them pays a green fee that, at most public courses, is not an enormous number. Meanwhile, that 150 acres of turf has to be watered, mown, fertilized, and staffed exactly the same, whether 20 people played today or 200. Whether it rained, whether it's the dead of winter, the lawn does not care about your revenue. It just keeps growing, and it keeps needing. Compare that to almost any other property business. A hotel can add floors. A restaurant can turn a table 3 times in a night. A cinema can run more screenings. A golf course cannot make the day longer, cannot make golfers faster, and cannot squeeze more revenue out of the same acre without ruining the very product it's selling. The thing that makes golf pleasant, space, and slowness, is exactly the thing that caps how much money it can ever produce per acre. That is the fundamental economic disease at the center of this entire industry, and every profitable golf course you have ever seen has found some way to route around it. And if you want to see just how bad the arithmetic is, put a driving range next to it in your head. A range is a strip of land with mats, a net, and a machine that dispenses balls. It might occupy a small fraction of the acreage of the golf course. It needs a tiny fraction of the maintenance, because nobody cares whether the grass out there is perfect. And in a single evening, it can serve dozens and dozens of people, back to back, in bays, in the dark, under floodlights, who each pay for a bucket of balls and stay for an hour. Now, compare the money that little strip generates per acre, per hour, against the money generated by the enormous, immaculate, exquisitely maintained fairway that 4 people are slowly walking across. It isn't close. The range wins, comprehensively, and it wins on a fraction of the land and a fraction of the cost, which is the entire reason the golf entertainment venues you've seen in cities exist, the ones with the bays. And the food and the music and the technology, somebody looked at this arithmetic honestly and realized you could keep everything people actually enjoy about hitting a golf ball, throw away the 150 acres, and make far more money. That's the shadow hanging over every traditional golf course owner. The land-hungry, slow, thirsty version of the product is the least efficient way anyone has ever found to monetize a person hitting a golf ball. And you just bought 150 acres of it. So let's look at how the money actually comes in, and watch how quickly the golf stops being the point. The first layer is green fees. Someone shows up, pays to play around, and walks out. Simple and honest and thin. It's weather dependent, it's seasonal, and it's capped by everything we just discussed. Green fees alone will keep the lights on at a busy public course and will almost never make anyone wealthy. The second layer is memberships and dues, and this is where the private club model lives. Instead of selling rounds, you sell belonging. Members pay an initiation fee to join. sometimes a very large one, and then annual or monthly dues whether they play or not. And that last part is the beautiful bit. Dues arrive in January when the course is empty and frozen. Dues arrive during the rainy week when nobody teed off. It converts a weather-dependent, seasonal, unpredictable business into something that looks a little like a subscription, and it is the single most stabilizing force in club economics. But it comes with a trap, and clubs fall into it constantly. Your dues are set by what your members will tolerate, and your costs are set by biology and water prices, which do not consult your members. So when maintenance costs rise, the club has to either raise dues, which members hate, and which drives some of them to quit, or defer maintenance, which is invisible for a while and then suddenly isn't. And a club that starves its course to protect its dues discovers, 3 or 4 years later, that its greens are failing, its reputation is sliding, its members are leaving, because the course got worse, and now it has fewer members to pay for the enormous repair it can no longer avoid. That death spiral has killed a genuinely large number of clubs, and it always starts as a reasonable decision to hold off on something for 1 year. The third layer is the one that changes everything, and it's the one first-time buyers consistently undervalue: food, beverage, and events. Here is the fact that reframes this entire industry. On a great many golf properties, the most profitable square footage on the entire estate has no golf on it at all. It's the clubhouse, the restaurant, the bar, and above all, the banquet room. Because a wedding is one of the highest margin events a venue can host, a couple will pay an enormous sum for a beautiful setting, a plated dinner for 150 guests, an open bar, and a photograph on a manicured green lawn at sunset. Corporate outings, charity tournaments, holiday parties, funerals, reunions, all of it on land you were mowing anyway. Think about what that means structurally. The golf course is the view. The golf course is the reason the photographs look expensive. But the transaction, the actual money, happens indoors at a table over food and alcohol. At margins the golf operation could never dream of. Which is why so many golf businesses are, when you look at their books honestly, catering companies that happen to own a very large and very expensive garden. And the events business fixes the exact structural disease we identified earlier. Remember the problem. Your revenue is capped by daylight, by weather, by the pace of play, and by the fact that only so many humans can be on that land at once. A banquet room laughs at every one of those constraints. It works after dark. It works in the rain. It works in February. It can hold 300 paying people in a footprint, smaller than a single fairway, all of them buying dinner and drinks at once, in a few hours, on land that produces almost nothing the rest of the week. Every one of the ceilings that strangles the golf side of the business simply does not apply indoors. So the clubhouse isn't an amenity attached to the course. On the healthiest properties, it's the engine, and the course is the scenery that lets the engine charge a premium. And then there's the fourth category, the collection of smaller streams that quietly add up, cart fees, which are close to pure profit once the fleet is paid for. The pro shop, selling clubs, balls, gloves, and logo apparel. Lessons and clinics from the teaching professional. Corporate outings, where a company books the whole course for a day. Driving range revenue, which is genuinely interesting, because a range serves far more customers per acre per hour than the course does, with a fraction of the maintenance. Some courses have quietly discovered that their range and their restaurant are carrying the golf, rather than the other way around. So notice where we've landed. Green fees, capped and thin. Dues, stabilizing but constrained. Food and events, highly profitable and not really golf at all. And a scattering of ancillary streams. Stack them up and a well-run course can absolutely work as a business. But the golf itself, the actual playing of the game across your 150 acres, is the least profitable use of that land per acre, per hour, of almost anything you could do with it, which should make you deeply suspicious. Because if the golf is the worst use of the land, then why is the land still under golf? But before we answer that, there's one more piece of context you need. And it's the thing that has been quietly reshaping this entire industry for decades. There are, in a lot of markets, simply too many golf courses. For a long stretch, courses got built at a furious pace, often as amenities attached to housing developments, on the assumption that demand would keep climbing forever. It didn't. Golf takes an enormous amount of time, 4 or 5 hours for a single round, plus travel, and the modern world has been steadily taking that kind of unbroken leisure time away from people. It's expensive. It has a reputation, fair or not, for being stuffy and unwelcoming. And the generation that filled those clubs got older. So you ended up with more supply than demand. And in that situation, the courses don't all shrink gracefully together. They compete on price. Your neighbor drops their green fee to fill tee times, so you have to drop yours. And now everyone in the region is running the same expensive lawn for less money than before. Courses close year after year, quietly, in ordinary suburbs, and it barely makes the news. Which means when you buy a course, you are not just buying an asset. You are buying a position in a shrinking market, and you had better have a reason to believe you'll be one of the survivors rather than one of the closures. All right, now we can answer the real question. And here we arrive at the real answer, and at the question we opened with. There are people who buy golf courses who are not primarily buying a golf business at all. They are buying land, and the golf is what the land does while it waits. Understand the position. A golf course is a very large, contiguous, flattish, well-drained, beautifully landscaped piece of land, very often sitting inside or right beside a suburb where housing is expensive, and vacant land basically doesn't exist. Now, ask what that same parcel would be worth if it were not a golf course, if it were instead approved for 200 homes. The answer, in a lot of markets, is that it would be worth vastly more, enormously more. The land under the golf course, if it could be rezoned and developed, can be worth multiples of what the golf course itself is worth as an operating business, which means the moment you buy it, you are holding two entirely different assets in the same hand. There's the golf business, grinding along, maybe modestly profitable, maybe not. And underneath it, there's a giant, quiet, undeveloped land position sitting inside a built-up area. And this is why a golf course can genuinely be worth more dead than alive. Now, the reason this doesn't happen constantly is that converting a golf course into housing is one of the ugliest fights in local politics, and everyone involved knows it. Because homes were built around that course specifically to look at it, and those homeowners paid a premium for the view. When an owner announces the course is closing and something is going in, those neighbors go to war, and they have every incentive to. They fight the rezoning at every hearing. They organize. They litigate. Sometimes they win, and sometimes the fight drags on for years while the owner keeps paying taxes on land that produces nothing. So the land value is real, but it is locked. And the key to the lock is a rezoning approval that a few hundred angry neighbors are actively trying to prevent. Which is why so many closed courses just sit there, brown and abandoned, for years. That isn't neglect. That's a very expensive staring contest. And there's a third model, the one that explains a large fraction of the courses built in the last several decades, and it flips the entire logic inside out. In the developer model, nobody was ever trying to make money on the golf. Here's how it works. A developer buys a large tract of land. They build a golf course through the middle of it, and then they sell the surrounding lots as golf course homes, at a significant premium over what identical houses on ordinary land would fetch, because people will pay real money to live on a fairway. The course made every single lot around it more valuable, and the developer captured that premium at the moment of sale, across hundreds of homes. Now, do the honest accounting. The golf course, as a business, might barely break even, or lose money forever. It does not matter. It already did its job. It was never a revenue line. It was a marketing expense that got depreciated across the price of every house sold around it. The course is a permanent, beautiful, immensely expensive billboard, and the product it was advertising was the real estate, which is also why so many of those courses get into trouble later. Once the last lot is sold, the developer's reason to subsidize the golf evaporates. They hand it off, or sell it, or hand it to the homeowners association, and suddenly, a course that was built as an amenity and never designed to stand alone has to survive as an actual business. And it usually can't, because it was never engineered to. So step back and look at what you actually own when you own a golf course. You own an agricultural operation with a hard revenue ceiling, an enormous fixed cost, and a dangerous dependence on water, sitting on top of a hospitality and events business that is probably where your real margin is. Sitting on top of a land position that may be the single most valuable thing on the property, and that you may not be legally allowed to touch. Three completely different businesses, wearing one lawn. And the golf, the actual game, the thing you thought you were buying, is the least profitable of the three. It's the thing that makes the other two possible. The manicured view that lets you charge a premium for a wedding. The green space that made every house around it cost more. The golf isn't the product. The golf is the reason the product is expensive. So, should you buy one? Here's the honest split. The optimistic version goes like this. You buy a course in a place with plenty of affordable water, a long playing season, and a wealthy population that wants to belong to something. You build a strong membership base whose dues carry you through the empty months. You invest seriously in the clubhouse because you understand that the restaurant and the banquet hall are where the margin lives. And you fill your calendar with weddings and corporate outings and tournaments year-round. You keep the agronomy funded because you know the course is the marketing for everything else. And underneath all of it, you own a very large piece of land in a place where land is scarce, quietly appreciating, permanently optional. It's a real business, and it's a hedge, and it's a beautiful place to spend your mornings. The harder version looks like this. You buy a course in a drying region with a short season and a shrinking pool of players. Green fees don't cover the water bill. You raise dues, and members leave. You defer the aeration and the drainage work for 1 year, then another, and 3 years later your greens are failing and your reputation is gone. Your clubhouse is tired, so nobody books a wedding there. And the land underneath, the thing that was supposed to save you, cannot be rezoned because 200 homeowners bought a view and will spend a decade in court to keep it. So, you are left holding 150 acres of dying grass with a fixed cost. You cannot escape. And an exit you are not permitted to take. And notice what decides between those two futures. Almost none of it is the quality of the golf. Because in the end, a golf course doesn't sell golf. It sells the view, the belonging, and the dirt. The game is just the excuse everyone agreed to use.